Welcome, everybody. After lunch is always rough. Hopefully we took it all light. It was a light lunch. Anyways, so thanks for coming to my session. We're going to talk about end user computing, like your desktops, as well as virtualized applications and what it would mean to move those to the cloud, some of the things that you need to be thinking about. My name is Theresa Miller. I own and run 24/7 IT Connection, which is tied to a blog. And you can find me on Twitter at 24/7 IT Connect. So a little bit deeper into what I will cover in terms of what you can expect. Again, what does it mean to get our end users to the cloud? Is your organization prepared to consider what this means? We'll talk about some use cases. We'll talk about the future of IT and is it in the cloud? Some product considerations, and then some just final concluding thoughts. I always like to do just a little bit of a slide about me. Most people don't know who I am. So one thing, I absolutely love Jenga. I think it's a blast. And the one here on the left is a giant Jenga, so it's tabletop. It gets really tall and it's a ton of fun. I have a almost teenage son, and him and I have been working on a tropical fish tank. I think we've got it down. The fish are staying alive at this point. And these are my two favorite fish. We have a Cory cat, which is the one in the middle, and a pleco we named Toothless after the dragon from How to Train Your Dragon. I love ATVing as another one of my side hobbies. And then I live in the Midwest, so I kind of took on the challenge of what it means to grow roses and get them to last through the winter. And so that's something that I have enjoyed. And then lastly, I am also a VMware expert, vExpert, and a Citrix CTP. So enough about me, and let's talk about end user compute in the cloud. So I feel that one of the challenges that organizations face are how can we move workstations to the cloud and ensure that they're going to have the functionality and uptime that they need. When you look at even VDI in general these days, there has not, I don't feel there's been the large shift that was expected. So why would we move our end users to the cloud and their desktops? So today we're going to talk about all those various aspects and uncover whether or not it makes sense for your organization. Just real briefly, high level, I think we all have a pretty good understanding of what it means to have a public cloud. So who here is doing anything in the cloud today, just in general? Okay. And then what about workstations or applications? Okay. What about VDI on site, on premises? Okay, so that's that adoption challenge that I was mentioning. So we all, I think we all understand that the public cloud is about keeping these devices on premise and using that compute in the cloud. One of the up-and-coming trends that organizations are moving more and more towards is the hybrid cloud. So where you keep some of your work processes on site, but then you move some of it to the cloud. And I see this as more and more of an emerging trend. So I took a look online to see what some of the other resources were saying out there. So organizationally, tmc.net.com says that PCs have been replaced at a rate of about 9% into virtualized workstations. And that was last year. And they predict that it will likely exceed a rate of 40% by 2020. I personally am a little bit skeptical of this, but I do feel that with the advancements made in storage, like we've seen a lot, we had a flash panel, flash storage. You hear about grid cards for graphically intensive applications and videos. I feel that the cost of those things coming down is really going to help with workstation, not only on-prem, but in the cloud. as more and more companies offer these types of technologies. Gartner made a prediction in this space as well. They were saying that by this upcoming year, 2016, that the bulk of IT spend will be in the cloud. Again, I feel a little skeptical because I think every organization is different, but I think companies are more and more interested in cloud, and they're much more open to what it means to put their organization out there. And then my prediction is that hybrid cloud is going to be more and more of a preferred choice. You're going to put some of your workloads in the cloud where it makes sense for your organization, but you're probably going to leave some of it, more of that, some of the things on-prem, things that you care about from a security perspective, or maybe there's private information that you wouldn't want to put in the cloud.
So what does that mean? Security? That means cloud is not secure enough?
It does not mean that cloud is secure. I think it varies depending on the product. So, and it also depends on the organization. So like, for example, in the financial industry, there may be aspects of the business that are perfectly appropriate for the cloud, but there are certain things you may never want to put there because you feel more comfortable keeping them there. Or let's take healthcare. I think healthcare is a lot more open to it, but like email, for example, I just came off of a 10-year run in healthcare. If there was any risk of patient information being in that email, even though it's not supposed to be there, the last employer I worked with was not going to go there. And so it's really about taking a closer look at what it means to your business before you do it. So, and look at each vendor too. You know, looking at like an Office 365 product or Amazon product compared to maybe something just your local a local company is offering is totally different, and the security is totally different. So just taking a closer look at what that means before you would take that move.
So why do people think about moving their workstations to the cloud? What is the advantage of doing that?
So can I answer that in a few slides? Okay, because I do have some use cases, and that would, I think, address some of the advantages. Yeah. So is your organization prepared for this journey? How do you know if they're ready for the challenges that lie ahead? And when do you go to the cloud? VMware has a really nice readiness assessment. I did put the URL down on the bottom of the presentation. And this readiness assessment focuses on the number of workstations you virtualized. They focus on whether or not the organizational demand is there, as well as business, what's the word I'm looking for? Executive sponsorship. Is the organization ready? So an organization that doesn't have a lot of virtual machines, leadership's not really interested, and the organizational demand isn't there, you're not going to move. But you might start thinking about it if you already have some VDI workspace locally. So it's, I apologize, it's hard to see this slide. But basically in this case, there's not the organizational buy-in despite the fact that you already are doing VDI on site. So again, you're probably not going to move. Here we're starting to be a little bit more ready, not doing a lot of localized VDI and workstations, but you have a strong organizational demand and strong business goals. So you're starting to be more ready. And here, you're doing everything right. The organization has the buy-in it needs. So you're going to go ahead and your organization is ready to start thinking about this. So use cases. I think of the movie Big. You guys remember the movie Big with Tom Hanks? When I saw this, I kind of chuckled. But it's so true. What he was doing in that movie, you know, was playing with toys and then deciding if he really liked them, and then the business would go ahead and move forward with it. And this applies to what we're doing with our environments, even with workstations, anything we do with cloud. We want to try it out before we buy it. Let's get in there. Let's make sure we know what we want to do with it before before paying money and moving out to the cloud. So here are some of the business values. I know this disaster recovery comment came up earlier during one of our vendor presentations. But one of the things I've seen organizations struggle with on a regular basis is disaster recovery sites. Like, they want to do it, but it's always the first thing to get cut from the budget. It's a large expense. If you do your own data center, it's very expensive there. And so we also talked about in some of the other presentations that it's so easy and fast to spin up servers, and it's very similar with workstations. So any form of disaster recovery is a really great use case for businesses. Another great option is remote offices. You might have just a small remote office, easier to potentially, and more secure to put like a thin client on site instead of putting a full PC. So remote offices are often a great option. And employee training. You need a temporary training environment for 6 months. When you're done, you don't have to pay for it anymore. Tear it down. And you don't have hardware laying around on site that you have to try to repurpose. Are there any questions at this point? Okay. Maybe you're not as eager to try out something like your DR site because it is a large project, it's a large, potentially larger investment. Development sandboxing is a really great place that you can do end user computing in the cloud. Also, your test environments. Get your feet wet, try it out, see what works for your business, and make sure you know what you want to do before you start paying someone for a service. Also, now that maybe you've decided to move to the cloud, production. Production is likely a very great place to put your workloads. So what is the future of business in terms of the cloud? Again, it's going to depend on your organization. Some of the long-term benefits that your business can enjoy are business models are changing. We're all trying to do more with less, and there's a lot of interest in not having architecture on site. There's a cost tied to that. And so that is becoming more and more of a trend that we're seeing. Another advantage of using the cloud-based option is it's very scalable to growth. It's very easy to spin up, it's very easy to spin down. And we're also seeing a huge movement in the consumption of IT. Everybody wants to be able to do what they can do at home. I think, Tom, you had mentioned even like AWS, and it's so easy. There's easy, it's like an easy button, right? You don't have to configure all the networking, and that's what users want. When they come to work, they want what they have at home. And so that's something for us to consider as engineers and employees in IT, that they just want to do their jobs and they want it to be easy. So now the technical considerations. From a technical perspective, so as someone who may use Citrix on site or VMware on site, looking at what they may do in the cloud with your workstations, you are probably interested in deploying those workloads in a similar way that you have done on-prem. It actually reduces the learning curve as well. Versioning and lifecycle management. A lot of the vendors in this space keep track, or they are going to make sure you're on the latest and greatest versions of the software. So you're potentially not going to have to do any more upgrades, but you're going to care if they're going to do an upgrade and you get short notice. Like there could be user change happening, something's going to look different to your users, so you need to make sure that their versioning and lifecycle management policy works with your business because of the user change and impact. And then for those of you in larger organizations, the security and compliance piece is also really important. So we talked about before, you were asking, is it secure? Sure, but every business has a different idea of what security means. So your organization has to be comfortable with what you're putting out there and what that means. So we talked a little bit about hybrid, where some of our stuff's in the cloud and some of it's on-premise. What I am seeing is that with hybrid, you do have to be more aware of the versions you're running on site of any product that meshes with it. So whether this is the Active Directory piece that integrates up to the cloud for that one uniform experience for the users, or if it's the VMware or Citrix, if you're going to do any kind of hybrid model, there's likely a requirement of what you need to keep up to date on site to work with whatever's in the cloud. So keep that in mind. It doesn't make it wrong, just be aware. And there's also going to be a level of fast-paced change with any cloud-based provider, and that goes back to making sure you're comfortable with what their versions are. Again, I know I've worked in a lot of environments where change, like users are so sensitive to change that if you're not sure what's coming and it hasn't been communicated, they're going to be like, no, stop now. So things to keep in mind. So what is the best solution for workstation and applications in the cloud? Well, I'm not going to tell you which product to go with. This is a very personal and organizational choice, but these are the things you should be thinking about when you choose that product. So from an architecture perspective, I personally would still be asking them a lot of questions about their architecture, networking, and storage, because I want to know what's on the back end. Am I going to fail? How many failover sites do I have? Is my failover site, for example, one state away, or is it across the country? And then also, how does that affect the operations in your team? How do your job roles change once you've made this move? We've already talked about lifecycle management, but again, it has to, the lifecycle management policy of the vendor you choose has to work for your company. For example, if somebody, if the organization you choose says, well, I'm going to upgrade your Active Directory connector whenever I feel like it, you might say, whoa, wait a minute, I have a change management process in my business, that's not okay. Or on the reverse side of that, the vendor who's making those on-the-fly changes might come back and say, well, if you don't let us upgrade your connector on the fly, then you're at risk of not having your workflows continuing, you're not going to be able to continue to service your users. There's risk of downtime. So you have to make sure that those things work for you and your business. SLAs. This is one of the things that I personally struggle with the most with the cloud. Service level agreements for most cloud-based providers tend to be right around 99.9, 99.99. I've worked in many companies where that is just not okay, and then it's my tail end on the line if something were to go down. Most companies want, at least in my experience, they want 5 nines. And so if service level agreements are a huge priority for you, maybe putting your workstations in the cloud is not a good option. If 99.99 is fine because you're a 8 to 5 business and you're willing to accept that risk, then it might be a great fit for you. Also, the next 2 bullet points I'll keep together, monitoring and reporting. make sure that any product you choose lets you see what is going on within the product. Because again, if you've made the choice to move to the cloud, it's still, leadership is going to come back to you when something isn't working. And if you want to be able to give your leaders a quick and prompt answer, you're going to need the right monitoring and reporting to do that. So make sure the product you choose does. A few more considerations. Will any connectors for hybrid mode, are they allowed to be redundant? And what does redundancy mean within that product? The governance of hybrid cloud, who's in charge of what? We talked a little bit about upgrading of connectors and the vendor potentially being in charge of when that connector upgrades. Who governs which piece? What do you have control of? What don't you? Make sure you understand those things. And then just to reiterate, security and compliance. Again, make sure that whatever that vendor is doing works for your business and your needs. So my concluding thoughts here are that cloud is not for everybody. It is for a lot of organizations, though. I mean, it's where everything is going. But evaluate your environment risk. Know what you want to do with it before you implement it. Couple end user compute vendors I mentioned already in the presentation, VMware and Citrix. They both offer product trials in these spaces. So get in there, kick the tires around, see what you're more comfortable with, regardless of whether or not you are a Citrix or VMware shop. And so hopefully with that, you can now figure out what your organization may do in this space. So we have a few minutes. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
On the SLAs, what's your experience of people reviewing things like if the SLA is breached, what remedies are available?
So in the cloud-based arena, you are at the mercy of that vendor. So in terms of resources, you should make sure that you have a good support agreement with them, a great method of communication with that vendor so that you can, in a timely manner, communicate back to your leadership what is going on. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of. I wondered if you could share some experiences with people you might have dealt with about how they've experienced it and what they've found.
Oh, in terms of, yeah, so that's an interesting question. More specifically, so I've typically, for me, I'll just use myself. So I've usually worked in 24/7 environments, and so it's actually not a risk that they would be willing to undertake. I'm trying to think of, I apologize, I don't have another good example outside of that. So, but I do know that you can, leverage support.
Do you know a solution to provision complex software on top of the desktops? Like if you are provisioning from AWS or whatever, so how can you manage all the software provisioning, patch management, or whatever?
In the cloud?
Yeah.
So
Up to cloud.
Up to cloud? Yeah, so it's going to depend on the vendor. I probably have the most experience in the Citrix product, and they give you basically the same tools that you would have on-prem. So you can, which in that case is like a PVS tool that allows you to upload your images right into the console, and honestly, the experience is the same.
Citrix provides the product to the service providers, right? Or to the organization, to the end users?
To the organization and the end users.
Okay, so you have to buy single instances on the cloud, and then you have to build on top of that. So it's you can buy a desktop as a service with all the features that you can.
Right, with all the features, if you don't want to have necessarily the same level of control, yeah, you could. You could. Anything else? Okay. All right. Thank you.